motivation behind this question is when you were too Black or when you weren't Black enough, from both Black, African Americans and from white European Americans. So have you been made to feel like you aren't qualified to speak on important topics relating to Black wellness through the lens of your own experience? And I'm not going first now.
And I done talked enough, so I'll wait.
I'll talk then. How about that? Qualified. Am I? And no, I'm not. I'm not qualified to talk about the Black experience. And I know that. And so, for example, Kashana and I were talking about this in preparing for today. Some things I know, I just assume everyone knows, but I don't think you knew, Kashana. So something like 1% of the globe gets schizophrenia. They're not sure exactly why. Personally, I think it's a trauma illness. Because I worked in inpatient mental health for several years, I never met, or in my own family and extended family, someone with schizophrenia who didn't have trauma. But there's a brain disorder in there. But anyway, I'm saying that because in the US, more people of color get that diagnosis. It's statistically impossible that as many people of color actually have schizophrenia if the global percentage is 1%. So I don't know who all here has ever heard of Undoing Racism, which is this amazing organization where they try to help people understand. It's built for all colors, but I think it's certainly designed for my color, to just understand that you don't have to personally be racist if your bank is redlining. Your bank can be racist for you. So you can say, well, I'm not racist. I love everyone. But then you don't pay attention to all the places where there's no seat at the table. So given that I knew that when I went back to school, I had to put 3 years in to get my hours because I actually wanted to go to a private practice. And so I took Undoing Racism on my own before I started at Bellevue Hospital, which is where I wanted to be, which is our nation's oldest hospital. Because I know I'm not a revolutionary, but I could be a micro-revolutionary. And that's always been my strength. I used to apologize. I'm not the big, loud person, but I'm the one whispering in the ear. And I learned so much there. I'm progressive and liberal. I actually grew up in Harlem. So during the 1960s, so I'd been around a lot of stuff. So all to say, you didn't have to convert me. I learned so much, even having this viewpoint. And then when I was at Bellevue, I could bleed as an ally. Things like there's always interdisciplinary meetings. And so if something came up, I would say, well, I can't say whether something is racist. I mean, if someone of color says something that's racist, it's racist. So we're going to start with that premise. And I deliberately moved the conversation along. Like, that's not up for debate. And there were just certain things that course deliberately helped me have tools because there were so many terrible things that were happening that I could help in the way that I could help. He had somewhere to go, and it wasn't your traditional family, but he had built a family. And finally, he could speak in a way that I could say, well, what number? So I could get the phone number. And ultimately, I connected him back to his untraditional arrangement. And that's partly my Undoing Racism. And then I often did my micro revolutions, which was invisible. I didn't shout. I actually didn't say anything, so I could slowly help this person who, because of his color, he was going to get a whole lot less help. So that's my story I wanted to share about who can talk about what.
Bridget, this is deep for me to hear you say that. Because when my Black father died, they labeled it schizophrenia was his cause of death. That ain't no damn cause of death. You drafting him and putting him in a war, that is the way he's separated. And it's disgusting because I have personal experience with that, sorry. But I'm like, all the bullshit from being poor in Appalachian and being Black meant that he got a round trip ticket to Vietnam at the prime of his life. And then you tell me he died because he's schizophrenic, and you can't even give him a diagnosis, a fair evaluation. Only his primary care physician from Huntington, West Virginia, which is where Carter G. Woodson spent a majority of his life. There were some semi-fair white doctors, and I finally got his records that said this strong, young Black male was very healthy before he left here. Clearly, the trauma of Vietnam is what caused his mental, spiritual, emotional separation. So that kills me to hear that you're saying there's only 1% in the world, but in the United States, these fools want to say how many Black Americans are suffering from schizophrenia. Will you quit doing all the crazy policy making that you've been doing? We might be able to hold it together more. That's all I have to say.
It's so true. A lot of our soldiers, they suffer from PTSD after coming from such a traumatic experience. And you know, back in the day, they call it shell shock. And I see a lot of our soldiers, and like I said, I work with wounded warriors, and I fly out and I help them, and you'll be surprised the stories that they share. There's like, we don't want the government helping us. They don't want to put us here. And when I look at that, and they're afraid to really say their real symptoms because of what comes with that. So they talk around it, and they're not authentic in the room because they're afraid when they share what's really going on with them, they're gonna lose their benefits. They already not getting what they deserve. So they figure, you know what, I'm just gonna walk that line as much as I can, because I'm afraid if I speak up too much and share too much, I'm going to be labeled in a way that I lose it all. I see two classes of individuals that fall in here. Our people that are in the service, and then our professional athletes. It's like, once I use you up and I don't need you no more, you on your own.
Oh my God. Yes.
While you in the limelight and while you doing what I need you to do, I'm going to give you them dollars. And I'm going to make sure you well taken care of. But the minute that you get injured, the minute you get hurt is the minute that I cut you off. Matter of fact, I'll give you a year of benefits in your salary. But after that, your normal way of living is out the door. You got to fend for yourself. You got so many people walking the streets. You got so many people that's homeless, right? It ain't because that's the way they wanted to be. That's the way they landed out to be. And if you really had a conversation with them, they say, hey, I used to play for the Redskins, or I used to play for the Eagles, or I used to be in the Army, and I used to be in the Navy, and they cut me off. Mm-hmm. And I lost everything, including my family, because sometimes family don't know how to respond to that. So it's just disheartening. But this is the I guess the land that we live in, right?
Well,
yeah, because Shauna, when you say Black wellness, like that's part of it, what Dr. Tina is saying. Also, like historically, if we identify the truth, it puts us even at more risk. And then by integration, we don't have all our Black doctors that we would have, many of them who were practicing powerfully in the 50s and 40s are passed on. And so, yeah, why am I going to identify all the things that I need mental health with if those who are practicing now don't have our best interests at their heart? I'm not saying it's not just about race, but we still have to be clear about there were many practicing healthcare workers, Black, and before we had integration, and now we have it, and then there's a whole residue of things that are left.
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, I'm glad that this topic of the military is coming up. In my own personal experience, I believe, and this is, again, opinions my own for anyone watching this. So I really do feel like in some way, when you're preparing for war, whatever your gender is, whatever your culture, you're battling up to be your strongest self, your fiercest self. You're calling up the ugly in order to get your task done. maybe to protect your tribe or to protect your troops or your gang or whatever. And I really feel like growing up, there was this kind of unspoken about presence wherein I saw a grandparent who had their own personality, all the clapbacks, all the sarcastic comments. You know, I used to be in the fashion world, you know, what feels like another lifetime ago. And I did this sort of a Levi's Dockers ad that was on the back cover of a magazine. And so one of the comments I heard was, I guess she can't be on the front of a magazine cover. Now, to the naked eye, sure, we could easily go to anger at the patriarchy or even siding with the patriarchal comment. But to be honest, this is a person who is Black, who has been so dehumanized when it comes to his hue of melanin. He served in the war only to come back and sort of be in this mixed environment and had a family of women to protect. He had several daughters. So I think what I've learned is that, number one, I've had to confront my sadness, my heartbreak, because there was a lot of PTSD passed down. And it's something that's so important for us to talk about. For those of you watching, you don't have to out someone or tell your family's personal business, which is such a big part of Black healing and wellness. But, you know, really being clear and starting to understand some of those toxic narratives. So, you know, I was not Black enough, not white enough in my environments, and it did such a number on me. Not Black enough, being constantly compared to my sister who's no longer with us. I'm considered this and I'm considered that, and you think you're this. So for those of you watching, think about that and fill in the rest of that sentence. You think you're so good. You think you're better than. You think you cute because you light skin. You think you cute because you have good hair. Now, these are the old narratives, and I see a lot of those, you know, as all of us mature and find a closer intimacy together as a culture. I see a lot of that going out, but I also see a lot of people saying, hey, I have the right to feel the way I feel, and we all do. But I think just us being transparent about the number that does, if we want to be critical of things we see, is there a constructive way, an educational way we can do that? Because by the time you butcher up a tween, a teen, a child, and you know, for me personally, being called white by a family member who had themselves been extremely violent with other family members. I didn't know it at the time because I didn't have the language, but what I was hearing was the rape that you see in these books, the experiments you see on children, and the pressure that sensitive Black kids feel when it's like, hey, it's time to sit down and listen to history. If you don't listen to history the way we do, then you're a sellout, or you think you're light, or you're trying to do this whole proximity thing. We so rarely guess someone's just extremely vulnerable and sensitive and are worn so thin that there's nothing left to navigate. So I think for me personally, if you're going to criticize, especially Black women, we carry so many people. So if you're going to criticize, my ask is that all of us take that personal moment and be so specific with what we're observing. And if you have access to an educational part of the comment, hey, it might be helpful if you're in a space of empathy, because right now I don't feel you're empathizing with me. That's a feedback my brain can get with. Mm-hmm. But when you call Black people white, let's just be clear what you're saying. You're a rapist. You will go places and steal people. You will human traffic. You will cheat people. You will steal from them. You will create structures where when they pass away, their house papers will be taken away because they didn't have the correct paperwork for their homes to be inherited by their families. And to me, I just want to be transparent, and I'm holding myself accountable in this conversation. I've never heard anything so horrible. So please know, if you're being historically correct and accurate and someone of color aggravates you, and we know aggravation happens, it's okay. When you say you're so white, please be clear what white colonizers did. And that's my challenge to those of us who may be experiencing frustration, and that's the first insulting go-to. Because what we're really doing is we're re-slaughtering people that are trying and doing their best. And not everybody has that mentor to go to. Not everybody has a Bridget. Not everyone has a Dr. Tina or a Mitzi and Janelle to kiki with after an intensive, right? So we want to be really understanding and clear. Some people might not feel safe to talk about this. So, you know, I do feel like being too Black, being aggressive, being chastised in a way that you're giggling in class and you're like in 4th grade, right? It's not because you're going to grow up and blow up the World Trade Center, right? It's maybe because school is the freaking safest place. And not because you're creating boogeymen, but because you're trying your best to protect parents that are overwhelmed and triggered and knee deep in their own PTSD to the extent where they can't even see straight. And that's the home that a lot of our young Black people are going back to. Yet we expect them, well, that's what she gets. Well, she needs to close her legs. I clowned her. Yeah, I'm about to tear her up. Oh, she's about to see this thunder coming. And we've made it a sport. I don't think there's anything wrong with being furious, anger, having bones to pick with someone. But I really want us to unpack how we can do that better. Can we do it without completely assassinating one another's character or giving ultimatums in terms of, you're just not going to exist if you're not with this clique of cool kids? Because that also can kind of really confuse and damage the Black women community and the Black community.
Mm-hmm. So true. Mm-hmm.
Damn crickets that I
That was
like I popped off. You're like, okay, what else, Kashana? Like, you get out much?
That was good.
We need it. We need to take the lid off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is so pretty unrelated, but you said a couple things like, you know, people calling you white and how you took it. And it made me think of, I'm just labeling everything mental illness, just so you know, this hour. So as an adult, a young adult, okay. Anyway, as an adult, when I moved to Georgia, I got into the cowboy community, Black cowboys, and a lot of them called me white. Okay, we all see what's happening here. But they called me white because I didn't have like a Southern accent. And, you know, I pronounced all my words, you know, because in Atlanta, sometimes they kind of just stop in the middle. And I guess it was like a Northern mindset. You know, I got from white people, they called me Yankee all the time. And I was like, whatever, you know, I didn't take offense to it. I thought of the Yankees, you know, I'm a fan, right? And they're going to call you what they call you. But with Black people, they really called me white. And that was like the first time that had happened to me in my life. And I'm like, how am I white? You know, just because I don't use slang and I don't curse and spit and, you know, and they were playing out the cowboy movies that they had been watching for years. Not all of them, you know, acted that way, but there's a certain way that you're supposed to act when you're a cowboy. And they, you know, they had on their hats and their boots and they're like, you know, and it's like, that goes back to the other mental illness that I was talking about, playing out those movie characters. And I just thought it was interesting how someone calling you white went one way and calling me white for a completely different reason that I still don't quite grasp, you know, goes the opposite way. And it was really them just saying I was better, which again, goes into a mental illness that you think, not you, but this person, you think white people are better than you. and you're, you know, kind of taking that out on me. And that was something that is like, if you think speaking better is something that you want to do, then, you know, start speaking better. Or if, you know, you think what I'm into makes me better and you want to be that, then be that. But I never really understood how, I guess I don't even know if it's an envy or a fear for them, but pointing at me, calling me white, I never understood what it did for them. And it's still a mystery for me.
I could definitely relate to what you're saying, Janelle. And I'll put that in the category of microaggressions can come from people that look just like you, right?
Wow.
But when I talk on the phone to different people, when I present myself, they'll say similar things like that, like you sound white, or you act white, or like I'm kind of escaping my own culture and it's far from the truth, right? And it just amazes me how they project that onto you. So when we talk about like not feeling educated or experienced enough to share your knowledge, most of the time I get it from people that look just like me. Even on these social media pages, like I do coaching and counseling, right? And sometimes like I'll interject, like if I see a question, I'll answer it. And sometimes the feedback that I get from people that look like me, I'm like, you know, it ain't worth it. I'm just trying to like talk like I'm talking now. It becomes an attack. And I saw someone else like post something, I think it was on Instagram, right? And they were like, what is I forget what it was. What is borderline personality disorder, right? And this is a clinician asking this question, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm curious to see what people wrote, like what approach they came from, because you know they always coming out with some new something. I said, let me see if somebody put some new description in there. When I read it, they were like, what kind of clinician are you, not knowing what borderline personality is? I wouldn't have anybody come see you. You should be ashamed to not know. And these was people that, and I was like, yo, this is crazy. Like, and I'm like, whoa. And one more time, when I was on, it's an all Black clinician group, and somehow or another, someone white got into the group, and she posted that she really liked the group, and her picture clearly showed that she was white, and everybody in the group ganged up on her, and they said mean and harsh things to her, and I'm like, yo, what's going on? Like, why are we being so mean to her, right? And somebody responded to me, it's always one trying to stand in the gap for somebody else, right? Like for them, taking up for them, meaning that I was taking up for the individual that was in the group, right? That was white. And my question was, if she's not supposed to be in the group, who let her in? Who let her in? If it's just strictly for people of color, who let her in? And then the head of the group was like, well, I can't gatekeep, blah, blah, blah. And it became like real ugly, right? But the attack was almost like that I was in alliance, and I'm in alliance for what is right. I don't want it done, period. I don't want it done to me, and I don't want to be doing it either, right? And it was just harsh the way, and I was like, yo, I thought we were supposed to be our sister keeper. I said, we can continue this conversation offline. I said, I think it's more appropriate for us to continue this conversation offline. And I got put in Facebook jail, right, for making that statement. I was in, I think somehow I got rid. I don't even know how the Facebook worked, but I was in Facebook jail that I wasn't able, I didn't realize it because I don't always post that much. And I went to post and I'm like, I don't see my posts going nowhere. So I couldn't post in groups for like, it was like a certain amount of days that added up to a lot of hours. And I get a lot of information from these groups when I have questions. Like I may say, who has a suicide after hour policy? Like I want to maybe update my policy, see if I'm missing something. And I literally couldn't post. I am to the point now, I don't post in those groups. However, I still get valuable resources from those groups, but I don't say anything because it's almost like, here come this bougie B coming in here. Like, because I don't get down with some of their conversations. I just don't. It's just not for me. But it may be entertaining for them, but it's just not entertaining for me. So what I can get, I get. And I just felt like it was when I stand before some people, the people that look like me, I'm not always received. My experience isn't always received. And it's okay, because it doesn't mean that it takes away from me. And people are entitled to accept me or reject me. And then I'm also entitled to care or not to care, right? So I think it's the way that we program our mind, because they're not the only one with options. Like I can care, and I'm using good words right now while I'm on this Zoom, but I can care or not care, right? And I have to, and here it is. When I use harsher words, I have to for myself so it can click with me, like not to really care. Because if I'm too gentle with it, then I feel that I might internalize it to the point that I'm sitting there overthinking it. When at the end of the day, we both have our rights to feel. So what does that mean for me? I'm still going to show up as my authentic self. When I'm asked, I'm still going to speak my authentic words and all that stuff. But every table ain't meant for me to sit at, and I'm okay with that. Every table, I don't have to plant my feet. And here it is. Every table, I don't want to eat from every table. So it is what it is. When I get the crumbs, I just take them and I keep it moving.
Okay, yes. Last comment, Mitzi, before we wrap it up.
No, it's so interesting, like y'all, as a growing up in my mixed raceness, because I was raised that way. I always thought that if I've had my experiences in middle school, and I present that in my work as an artist, but somehow I always thought if I had my Black father and more of my Black family growing up, that all these issues about being with, people of color, Black Americans, that I wouldn't have had to deal with it in that way. And they would have got my head straight about how to let some of those kinds of comments, like Dr. Tina and Kashana, what you've talked about. But it's like, it happens even if your whole Black family is intact. It happens if your whole mixed raceness is accepted in your household. So it's not funny, but I'm just like, wow. As a kid, I used to tell myself that, well, I wouldn't have to deal with this in the way that I have if my Black father was here, and I would have had understood, race and how it made me, culturally, I'd have better agency of it. That's not true, right? Because people are going to be negative and funky. If they're hurt, they're going to hurt others.
Yes. And that's a really perfect beginning of wrapping it up this time around. For those watching, we want you to know that this is not about you having to be a saint, perfect, unreasonably kind to the point where you're just one note. This is as much a conversation about our inner anger, our inner fury, our inner rage, as it is all those other amazing, what Bridget commented on the other day, carousel of inner selves that are really here to be a back pocket resource for our journey. It's not the other way around. Wellness isn't trying to find us to make us better or make us white. Whatever resources help us grow, hey, why not? So maybe everybody wants to go around, just say one last final thought, and then we'll have to say goodbye this time around.
I'll jump in. My final thought is just I have so much gratitude, and healing just period for me means I'm living a life right now I could never have dreamed possible. And this is like a dream come true. And I just feel the tears of my heart. So thank you for being here, and Kashana for spearheading this and for helping wellness just get deeper and more out there in all the forms. I just have an imp comedy side, and I just have this vision, like I want to volunteer to go help the Black cowboys in Atlanta.
Wait, so do I. What? Let's go.
I'm like, there's Black cowboys in Atlanta that all get together. All right, Kashana, I think they should learn voice dialogue, and maybe Janelle will introduce us.
There are Black cowboys everywhere, even
In Harlem too.
Brooklyn, Harlem, yes. I used to ride in Brooklyn as well. So.
Everything is close to home, just like Dorothy learned. Thank you.
I got the best picture of my Black and Cherokee great-grandfather on his horse in Virginia. It's so awesome. Like, oh my God. Bridget, what you were saying to piggyback on, healing to me and paying attention to my spirit, my mental health, telling my story and using it in my art form to hopefully inspire others. My uncle said to me one time, who was a captain in Vietnam, he said, how do you keep doing that work? And how do you share that part of this, the way the play plays out? And I said, but it makes so much room for joy in my heart that I never, ever knew I could feel. And so my thing about healing is like mental healing, emotional, equitable joy. That's what I hope for all of us, you know, equitable joy, not just resources, but if we're to a place where we have joy, that means Dr. Tina gets to satisfy her soul, Janelle, Bridget, Kashana, equitable joy. Somehow, whatever you needed and wanted, you got it, and you're joyous.
And any final thoughts, Dr. Tina?
Yes. So, one of the things when we talk about mental wellness is don't weigh yourself on somebody else's scale, right? Because you'll never measure up. And I think so many of us may have been in that space or in that space now. And if you find yourself weighing yourself on somebody else's scale, get off of it. Because here it is. What happens is when you weigh yourself on somebody else's scale, you're looking at all their awesomeness, all their greatness. And we talked about it earlier, the imposter syndrome and feeling less than. You're always looking at the positive things of that other person. And guess what you're doing with yourself? You're finding all the negative, that inner critic. You're criticizing yourself. You're pulling yourself apart. So stop doing it. I think that's a first step to helping you get this thing called mental wellness right, and clearly define these words when we talk about joy, when we talk about peace. Really make sure you have a definition for it, because what happens is sometimes we use these words and we don't correctly define them. And when we don't correctly define them, it makes it really hard to obtain. So just clearly make sure you define these words and get off that scale.
Okay, so until next time, you are what's that, Bridget?
She is saying that I raised my hand.
Oh, my bad. Hi. Ooh.
It's okay.
Let's rewind.
So yeah, what I was gonna say is, and Dr. Tina, that was beautiful what you just said. And this has been something that's kind of been with me the whole time we were speaking. And the last question, I wanted to chime in differently, but I didn't. Weighing yourselves on other people's scales. That's me all day, every day, right? And for that reason, I don't feel like I'm qualified or able to speak about, mental health for Black people, because I look at myself as someone who's grown up in a great family. I didn't have a lot of issues that other people have. So, and I'm saying that to say, I don't feel like I have a right to even have feelings, because I didn't have this happen to me, or I didn't have that happen to me, or, it's not a charmed life, but compared to what you hear sometimes, like I grew up a great family. We weren't rich, we weren't poor, but we were just right there in the middle, and everybody's, happy. It wasn't all like that, but for the most part, I guess what I'm just trying to say is I'm very grateful for what I've had. But with that, there's another part of me that still feels sad sometimes, or, whatever I'm feeling, and I don't feel like I have the right to feel that. And that's where a lot of my struggle happens, because, I feel like I don't have that right because so-and-so over here, grew up in a broken home, or, so then I'm not validated. I don't even validate myself. So it's not so much what other people are doing or what the environment is doing, it's what I'm doing to myself. And that's like my main, I guess, focus that I need to hone in on and kind of accept myself. I hate to say for my greatness, but for what I've gone through, just appreciate that and not have to, quiet myself or dim my light because I'm happy, But yeah, so that I just want to say thank you for that statement.
Amazing.
And I'm out. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. I'm so glad we had this moment today. This was really powerful. And for everyone watching, ask yourself these questions. Drop some comments in the chat box if you have a real question. And so take care, everyone. It's been such an amazing journey today with Bridgit Dengel Gaspard, Dr. Tina Scott, Mitzi Sano, Janelle Mohammed, and me, Kashana Evans. To be continued.
Thank you so much.